Donald Trump's swearing in on Monday was the preference cascade heard around the world. Hey, everybody, I'm Steve Green with Bill Whittle and Scott Ott. Almost got ahead of myself. This is
that
right.
kind of week, man.
It is. This is Right Angle, brought to you by the members of BillWhittle.com. And if we seem a little giddy after the inaugural, it's because we're a lot giddy after the inaugural. But the thing that really caught my eye, aside from my other segment this week about Trump wanting to plant the stars and stripes on Mars, with the actual SpaceX doing the work, was a statement that Vladimir Putin made on Monday, just a couple of hours after Trump was sworn in, that reverses, essentially, if he means it, and even if he doesn't, it could still work out, that reverses almost 3 years of Russian policy to completely subjugate Ukraine. He said, and this is a quote, "The goal should not be a temporary ceasefire, a short-term pause for regrouping forces and rearming to continue the conflict later, but a lasting peace based on respect for the legitimate interests of all people and nations living in the region." I never thought I would hear Vladimir Putin say that, not even in translation. Bill, Glenn Reynolds has been talking about this preference cascade that Trump, the election of Trump and the inauguration of Trump is unleashed. We've seen it in all kinds of ways. Culturally, I think, have been the most important one. But this idea of suddenly maybe getting peace in Europe seems like an awfully important one that's getting neglected in the news.
Gosh, it's just mystifying. I mean, on January 19th, he had this position that we're going to grind this thing out until Russia is completely victorious and crush the ruins of Kyiv under our boots. And then the very next day, he's talking about preserving national sovereignty and long-lasting peace. It's almost like something mysterious and powerful happened overnight. It's kind of the same way that those hostages stayed in Iran for 444 days, and then suddenly, overnight, something happened. We don't. I think it's caused us a lot of problems, but I think on balance, it's a reflection on the general goodness of the American people, that we do not appreciate how powerful we are. And a lot of people talk about American arrogance, but the fact of the matter is, when you really get down to the national mood about how powerful we are, we grossly underestimate the power of the United States. We just fantastically underestimate our own power. We are extremely humble about our capabilities, and to the degree that it actually hurts us. We spend going to spend close to $800 billion on defense this year. Russia spends maybe not even a tenth of that. Russia is not one of the 10 biggest economies in the world. And we've been spending that kind of defense spending for 70, 80 years now. When the United States has clarity of vision and purpose, then its ability to influence world events is unparalleled in the history of the world. Donald Trump seems to me to be fairly agnostic on the conflict, unlike Joe Biden, who clearly had a horse and some dollars in that race.
A lot of dollars.
Yeah. So this is the thing about Donald Trump that cannot be underestimated. We were talking on our backstage show about how pleased all three of us were about Marco Rubio's confirmation as Secretary of State, and what an extraordinary speech he gave to his people, and what an excellent Secretary of State he's going to be. But in this particular case, at least, Marco, the Secretary of State, is trumped, if you will not pardon the expression, by the fact that the President of the United States has essentially one skill set that he brings to the table, and it's not politics, it's deal making. There's a difference between politics and deal making, because in politics, you're not concerned about the optimal outcome for both sides. It's much more selfish than that. Trump has the ability to see what both sides want, and he knows what they want, and we both know what they want. Ukraine wants Russia out of Ukraine, and probably wants them out of Crimea as well. Russia wants Ukraine to be a puppet state of Russia. It's clear what they want. The question is, what can they get? Both sides have been bled white. It's an absolute catastrophe for both of them. And when I realized that Donald Trump had the ability to put an end to the fighting in Ukraine was when several weeks ago during the campaign, he was doing an interview. It might have been the Rogan interview, in fact. I'm almost positive it was, where he said, "No, you don't understand. Ukraine is the apple of Vladimir Putin's eye." And I thought, that's a profound insight. If Ukraine is the apple of his eye, it's the thing he wants most in the world, in the same way that Taiwan is the apple of China's eye. Now, he's not going to get the apple of his eye. But Donald Trump has the ability to find out what he will accept rather than what he wants. And if he can do that on both sides, and certainly Zelensky cannot be happy about the destruction and the killing that is going on in his own country to his own people on a daily basis. If there's a person on earth who can find a way to get both sides to accept what they'll take rather than what they want, it's Donald Trump. And the answer to this, Steve, is that Donald Trump's deal-making ability is going to be taxed to the limit, because for this to work, both Putin and Zelensky have to be able to go back to their own people and say, "We won," and be able to make a believable case for it. And I personally think Donald Trump's got it in him.
And
Steve,
can I add something to what Bill's saying before you ask me whatever you're asking me? I've had this experience in sales in my other life, and there comes a point sometimes during a transaction where a person realizes that they're not going to get what they dreamed they were going to get. It's not available, it can't be bought at the price they hoped, or whatever. And they're not going to get it. And the worst thing to do is to kind of back that person into a corner and say, "Look, you're not going to get it, so you got to settle for something less." The best thing to do is to empathize with them and say, "I know how much this means to you. And if you need to take some time just to process this, that's okay with me. You want to come back and see me at another time, that's great. But you need to back away and acknowledge you feel the pain that they're going through because they can't get it, and give them a chance, in essence, to grieve." And that's what Putin's going to have to do here. He's going to have to grieve the loss of something that he dreamed of. And he needs to have a moment to do that, but he also needs to see that Trump has the resolve to make sure that that it's going to happen one way or the other. But Trump is, I think, enough of a deal maker to understand that Putin needs a little space, and let him process that, and then let's move on to the next step when he's figured out how he can explain, as Bill said, to his own people how they won.
Yeah, and not only is that important, Scott, and I'm glad you brought that up, because we had, pardon me, we've had 3 years of total villainization of Vladimir Putin, which hinders the ability to negotiate a peace. And okay, let me clarify my position on the whole Ukraine war thing. It isn't that Putin is literally Hitler, because he isn't. He's just a thug. And it isn't that the Zelensky government is a Nazi regime, because it isn't, although I think Zelensky is corrupt as hell, along with the rest of the various Ukraine governments going back to independence 30 years ago. The thing is, wars in Europe, when they spiral out of control, tend to drag us in. In fact, John Adams couldn't even keep us completely out of the British and French War during his administration, even though he tried mightily to. And so this goes back to our very founding. Major European wars drag us in, and we don't want to have to do this again. So, Scott, with that in mind, if you're trying to put this deal together, the one that gives Putin the chance to grieve with his people and process a lesser win, and give Zelensky the chance to do the same thing. How do you think you do that?
Well, I don't share your same view of Zelensky, but I don't know him as well as you do, so you've probably done a lot more reading about this than I have. However,
again, not about good guys and bad guys.
Yeah,
they're national leaders.
No, I'm not saying that they're in any war that you can go, oh, there's the good guy, there's the bad guy. But I do see a clear moral difference in the two sides of this. However,
one is the aggressor.
Yeah,
one is the aggressor.
Yeah,
that's bad.
Let me just say it this way. Putin is you called him a thug. I'll use the word villain. Putin is a villain,
okay,
and Putin is the president of Russia. And so what you do in a situation like that is that you negotiate with the president of Russia, and you send clear back-channel signals to the villain at the same time. And so you don't negotiate in public with the villain. You negotiate in public with the president of Russia. And then you send a clear, strong message through back channels where you're not causing the president of Russia to lose face. You send those messages to the villain to make sure he understands how the deck is shuffled now and what his limited scope of options are. And then you let the president of Russia save face.
Yeah, when Biden basically said early on that this is going to require regime change in Russia, that was that was the end of a negotiated peace. That was just
and that's
idiotic.
What a weak man says when he doesn't know what else to do. And then Biden is a weak man in so many ways. Scott, it's funny you should bring up this sort of back channel thing because John Daly, the golfer, last year shared a story of a phone call that he had with then former President Trump. And what Trump told John Daly was, hey, Putin and I were friendly. We got along. We were able to negotiate. We were able to deal, which is exactly what you want now that there's a major ground war going on in Europe. And he said, but I told him, if you go into Ukraine, I'm going to hit Moscow. And Trump went on to tell Daly, he didn't have to believe me more than 5-10%. He just had to believe me a little. And that was enough to keep the deal. And that's the back channel message. That is the back channel message that Scott was talking about. It's, look, I'm not going to call you Hitler. I'm not going to say this or that and embarrass you in public. But just a reminder, we have B-2 stealth bombers and your air defense systems suck. And there you go. We can get peace out of this. 2 years too late, too many lives too late, too many ruined cities too late. But peace nonetheless. And that's important. Let's get there. All right, that's your right angle on that, brought to you by the members of BillWhittle.com. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.